everyone, and welcome to the Cybersecurity Readiness in Wisconsin County Government webinar. This is part 2 of a 4-part series that is being put on by the Wisconsin Counties Association Service Corp and also with Cybersecurity Collaborative. We have a joint partnership with them, and I'm joined by Tim Raschulte from the Collaborative, who will kick off part 2. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning, Michael. It's great to be with you and with everyone else joining today again here for this part 2. As Michael mentioned, this is a 4-part webinar series. And for those that tuned in to the first webinar, or maybe you watched it after it was recorded and posted online, you know that one of the things that we talked about was the power of collaboration, and especially when it comes to cybersecurity. The landscape of cyber threats and the risks that are coming at us are increasing at a fairly aggressive speed, and it is becoming difficult. It has been difficult and continues to be difficult for organizations, counties, and other government organizations as well as private industry alike to keep pace with the amount of cybersecurity threats and cyber risk that is all around us. You might recall during that first session that we focused on, the challenge of the Internet of Things. With a lot of individuals these days, especially because of COVID, working from home, we've actually increased the surface of risk when it comes to the security of the way in which we conduct our business as counties and the way in which individuals interact with us, both employees within the organization, as well as those that we service throughout our communities in every county in Wisconsin and across the United States. And because of that, cybersecurity has become an increasing area of focus for everyone. It is a topic within most of our executive committee meetings, within our management meetings, within the community. We see it on the nightly news on a fairly regular basis. We see it in news feeds all the time, the increasing nature of threats that we're faced with. And we have to become increasingly vigilant. And the way that we do that is through certainly software and security protocols of technology that we can leverage, new processes that we establish in the way in which we conduct our business. But it's also really about the people. It is, how well are we training and preparing our staff and the individuals around us? Because it's been said, and we mentioned it in the first webinar, people are really the perimeter of defense. And just like people are the safety within organizations these days, and they have been for a number of years, think about, any threat relative to, earthquakes or tornadoes or hurricanes or forest fires, or fill in the blank of, things that we used to focus on, 10, 15, 20 years ago, when we needed to focus on business continuity planning. We focused on some of those physical threats to our buildings, to our infrastructure. And these days, those threats still exist. But we also are now seeing more and more threats in the cyberspace, the internet, the network of things, if you will, in terms of the way in which we think about the continuity of our business and the services that we offer within our business. And it's because of that we focus on people being the perimeter, and people really being the area of focus that we need to keep in mind as we conduct this webinar series. And that's what we're going to focus on today. It is the extending the aspect of collaboration. How do we think about doing more with less? We hear that all the time. It is cliche, and we've heard about it for a number of years. But the way in which we do that, the way in which we do more with less, is by collaborating with other individuals, neighboring counties, organizations within our counties, neighboring states, counties across the states. And that's one of the great values of NACO and the membership services and the NACO member benefits that are provided by, extending the reach and extending the way in which we collaborate with one another to bring forward practices. I was going to say best practices, but what is best practice for one county may not necessarily be best practice for another county. So sharing practices and sharing protocols is the way in which we do more with less. And that's what we're going to focus on today. We're going to extend from what we worked through in the first webinar, which was really the kind of foundational, the landscape area of cybersecurity. And we're going to extend that, and we're going to focus on this webinar, session 2, around how do we assess our readiness? How do we think about applying tools to determine how ready we really are. And then in the next couple webinars, webinar 3 and 4, as you can see here on the screen, we're going to focus again on how we collaborate with our peers. How do we join our peers, on this webinar, learn from one another, and extend our capabilities, our readiness, preparedness when it comes to cybersecurity and defense against cyber threats. And so again, welcome everyone. It's great to be with you. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to use the chat box here for this webinar. And I want to start where we, as a bit of an overlap from webinar 1. There was a great article written last year, and it was a focus on ransomware specifically. 2019, you might recall, was dubbed as the year ransomware took over local government, specifically county government. Far more ransomware attacks are focused on county government and local government than any other ransomware attacks on any other organization. And what they did last year in this article, they brought together some great individuals, subject matter experts, thought leaders from CISA, as well as the Governors Association, as well as MSISAC, as well as NASIO and others. And they really distilled down, if we're to think about cybersecurity, how do we increase the level of cybersecurity? Well, there are 3 things that they highly recommended we do. Make sure that you do have a clear and tested backup and recovery system. Make sure that you're doing that on a daily basis. So first and foremost, just think about that right now. Do we have a backup and recovery system? If our building, if our physical infrastructure of the way in which we conduct business was to be altered in some way, again, due to an earthquake, a fire, a flood, a tornado, whatever that might be, do we have a backup and recovery system in place that we could recover quickly? Now think about that from a cyber risk perspective. If we were to be hacked in some way, if there was to be some type of attack on our system, do we have a backup and recovery? Would we be able to shut down certain servers and restart those servers in another way to conduct our business? Are our servers, with the critical assets that we have, are they segmented? You might recall from the first webinar, we talked a little bit about, the famous, now famous, Target attack. When Target Corporation was attacked, they weren't attacked by their point of sale system, their inventory system, some type of automated system like this, and a networked asset of their organization. The network that they were actually connected to and hacked through was their HVAC system. So think about the backup and recovery system in terms of managing and executing the critical business of your counties. Would you be able to recover if you were attacked by a physical disaster, earthquake, fire, tornado, as well as a cyber attack? Secondly, what this group of individuals came up with during in this article was, reinforcing and creating reinforcing mechanisms relative to building cyber awareness and education. If we were to be in a building right now, in one of your county buildings, and if we heard a fire alarm go off, we as employees would know exactly what to do. We know that sound. We know what that sound is to trigger in terms of immediate action. And we know what those actions are to help others, efficiently, exit the building, to arrange ourselves outside the building in a safe location, to work with the coordinators who are taking roll call on who is here, who is not here, who's accounted for, who is not accounted for. We know exactly what to do. Do we know exactly what to do in the same way if we were to recognize that we were under attack from a cyber scheme? If we find ourselves, trying to address some ransomware attack, do we have the same protocols, the same level of awareness, the same level of education that we would follow as we do during a tornado or during a fire drill? Having those drills become important. So reinforcing cyber awareness, reinforcing education, creating that education on an ongoing basis throughout the county becomes an important aspect. And then thirdly, they recommend that we regularly refine through revisiting our incident response plans. because what might have been a great incident response plan 6 months ago might need to be updated today because of new processes, because of new protocols, because of new systems and scenarios that we might find ourselves in. Because again, the landscape of cybersecurity is constantly changing, and therefore we have to constantly changing to keep pace, if not more ideally, to outpace the cyber threats that we face on a regular basis. And so those are the three things that we talked about last time in terms of laying the foundation about, yes, there's this great amount of risk that's out there, the world of threats as NIST refers to them as, and there's 40 some different vectors or ways in which cyber attacks can actually occur. And that world of threat list can really serve as a good measure to identify, do we have some of these threats, all of these threats, the majority of the threats that are most that we're most vulnerable to and have the most risk toward our continuity of our business, do we have those covered with clear systems for backup and recovery, with clear education and awareness programs, with clear incident response plans if they were to occur? Ideally, we never have a building catch on fire. Ideally, we're never going to find ourselves, in a flood type situation, but we plan for those just in case. And the same thing holds true when it comes to cybersecurity as well. And so the question then becomes, if these are in place, or as we think about assessing these backup and recovery systems, our education systems, our incident response systems, where are we today? And perhaps more importantly, where do we need to be today? How do we assess that? And if there's even a more important question than that, the question might be, how do we get from where we are to where we need to be, or where we would like to be in terms of a preparedness, in terms of a ready state when it comes to cyber preparedness? And that's going to be the focus today. The focus today is about, how do we understand where we're at? How do we understand where to get to? How are we going to make that happen? And the conversation that we're going to engage in, again, we invite you to participate in the chat box as well. Feel free to let us know how you're doing this. And one place that we'd like to start is with these 20 steps that you can take now, that you can take to reduce your risk. And I'd like to invite our colleague and friend, Rita Reynolds, the Chief Technology Officer of NACO, to join us. And Rita, thank you again for joining us here for the second installment of this 4-part series. And I know you're going to be a part of all 4 of these series. And so, Rita, thank you for your time. Thank you for the work that you're doing at NACO to bring an aspect of collaboration across all counties in the United States to increase our preparedness and our risk readiness, especially when it comes to cyber. So, Rita, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tim. I appreciate that introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here again today with all of you. And I lived this for so many years, working with counties and seeing how cyber has evolved and changed since the year 2000 to where it is now. And it's incredible, the change in our world and in our personal lives, but also in our work lives. And so this series is so critical for those of you on the call, whether you're in an IT role, a technology role, whether you're an IT director or staff that support the infrastructure of technology, or an elected official. It's, or a department head, it doesn't matter. This is all vital and important. What I am going to do is, there's three different types of assessments we're going to cover today. And they, you may see some commonalities, but there are different approaches. And depending on where you're at, one approach might work better for you than another. So the very first one that we have on the screen here is really just a set of questions that you yourself can ask, or if you're an elected official or a county administrator, sit down with your IT director or your CIO and just go through this list of questions. It might take you a half hour, 45 minutes, but it's definitely a really good place to start. And I want to spend a few minutes talking about each of the 20 areas. So we all hear over and over again how important passwords are, or you might hear the conversation about passphrases. Instead of using, a password, you now have a phrase such as, I've actually had someone say this to me, I hate passwords _2020. And, whatever works, whatever helps you remember. And the reality is that we have so many passwords that we have to remember that it is extremely difficult And I don't know about you, when I go online with a personal account, it could be a clothing store and I don't remember the password, I just hit reset because it's just a lot easier. However, from a organizational perspective, whether it's personal or at work, password managers do exist out there. There's several well-known ones. LastPass is one, KeyPass is another, and they are in the cloud. So I do hear some folks commenting about why would I use that one? It's in the cloud. There are some options depending on which one you look at that you can actually have that password keeper or password manager only locally. It really is up to you how you choose to do that. But a password manager really does help. And I appreciate seeing in the chat some affirmations there. So kudos to you. That's awesome to have that in place. Firewalls. We all, using Tim's example about fire emergencies, thinking about how you build your house, and some walls are more fireproof than others, depending on what you put in place. The same thing is true with the virtual firewalls that we put around our assets and what we know to be important to keep safe. And the next generation is just more functionality for catching and preventing intrusions quicker than ever before. Now, that's one that will come with a cost. And that's where you when you're talking to your peers and other counties, finding out what's working well, it may help you in making that decision. Number 3 is restricting access to data. And I remember way back when, this is going back a few years, more than a few, working in an organization where the executive director, no offense to elected officials, but wanted access to everything. And that was common practice many, many years ago, especially in smaller agencies. I worked with a lot of children and youth agencies in the one state, and helping folks understand, do you really need access to that data? Are you the one that's doing the quarterly reports and submitting the different forms that you have to submit to the state or federal government? And if you're not, then you really shouldn't have access. No offense on the position at all, but really restricting that access to data, even within your IT department. It doesn't mean that the CIO or the CTO, like myself even, needs access to every piece of data. The next one, number 4, has to do with what is called artificial intelligence driven anti-malware. So that's a big phrase to say, excuse me, the applications and tools you can download now can detect behavior of both your staff and your network and be able to identify malware quicker than ever. Something to look at, and depending on what you use, may cost a little bit of money. Number 5, with the vulnerability scans, I want to emphasize this one because as counties, if you're a member of MSISAC, you have the ability to sign up for their free vulnerability scanning. And then there are some additional scanning opportunities through CISA, which is a part of Department of Homeland Security, that go a little deeper and really help identify if, for example, your website, maybe it's running on SharePoint or Drupal and some of those other tools out there, and if they're not patched and up to date, it will tell you that pretty quickly. And that's one that if you take nothing else away today, there's one other thing I do want you to take away, but this one you should be able to do in a heartbeat and won't take you long at all. Then cybersecurity audits. I know this one's tough and it can cost a great deal of money, even for a small county. I would encourage you, though, when we get to the 3rd assessment, that will help you with a baseline that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, but also to encourage you to negotiate with the providers that do cybersecurity audits. Oftentimes, they can customize it and tailor it to one focused area, which will cut down on the cost. Educating your team. I saw a couple comments in the chat about using KnowBe4. That's awesome for your end users. You also need to look at your IT team and educating and providing them with opportunities to learn more about the risks and what they're doing from a security perspective. Moving right along with mobile device management, that's the MDM on the mobile phones that your employees have. I will tell you from experience perspective, and it is still true, the minute I start talking about putting a piece of software on an employee's phone that they own, I want to say more often than not, it's not quite as bad, but I hear that's my personal phone. You're not putting something else on my phone. My response back to them is, do you have work email on your phone? Well, you have a work asset, and this is why mobile device management software is so important. And let me show you how it works. I think educating employees in a layman's terms of it's not going to touch your personal stuff that you have on your phone, we're not violating personal privacy, will go a long way in implementing that. I will add here, that one does come with a cost. I think in the future, something we might want to do, Tim, is put a little $ by the ones we know are going to cost, and even some that cost a bit more, $4 signs, just to give you all some guidance there. Number 9, encrypting all devices. 100%. I'll go out on a limb here, and if you disagree with me, feel free to put this in the chat, but there is no reason why an end user's device should not be encrypted. There's no reason why, if you're still using USB devices, that they're not encrypted. It takes a little bit of work, but with all of the built-in abilities with the workstations that we purchase, you should be able to encrypt those devices. And I will tell you from a forensics perspective, when there's an incident, that's one of the first questions that I've gotten over the recent years, either from the insurance provider or from an audit. Was that device encrypted? And from a state legislative perspective, and I don't know the rules in Wisconsin, but I know in some other states they have made if the device is encrypted, then notifications don't have to happen because of that, having the encryption on that device. Enforcing password policies. And I do see a comment, can we get a copy of the slide? I believe that this is already up there. Anne-Marie has posted that on your website, your resources there. Password policies are great, so long as you enforce them and you're consistent. I would encourage you to go and take do a quick run of your infrastructure. If you're in IT, there are some free tools that you can actually run and see if anyone's password is set to not expire. I know that we sometimes have to make exceptions, and those exceptions should be 2 or 3 days, not 2 years. And then other password policies as well. Good strong ones are part of the CIS controls, and we'll talk about that in one of the other assessments. VLAN, don't need to say much here other than think target, think about your vendors and how are they coming into your HVAC system. That's the best example that I like to use to say that should be segmented off of your main local area network. Evaluating permissions may seem a little redundant to access to data, but it actually goes a little bit broader. The office manager doesn't need access to your servers. And maybe that was the case 10 years ago. You were very small and the office manager was responsible for doing something on the server. And so they were given complete global access. Reevaluate those. Removable storage gets to the USB devices specifically, and I know that some counties actually disable the USB or are ordering devices, although it can hurt you, ordering a device that doesn't have a USB port on it. You have to have alternatives then because there's so many of our accessories that need the USB port. So I've said repeatedly, do we really need to use a USB drive to back up data anymore? And if we are, then it should be encrypted and keeping a log. I think that is very important in your IT department, or if it's decentralized, that whatever department is handing out or distributing USB drives is keeping a log of those. Web content filtering has been around a long time. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Think Barracuda, WebSense, a number of those tools, and there are some actual free ones out there as well, just to help you control what your staff can go to during work hours, but also working virtually. Keeping them from getting to bad sites to start with is a really good idea. Guest Wi-Fi, and I know I've seen a number of situations where a guest Wi-Fi for a county is set up for like attorneys, for example, and there's no password on there. You really need to make sure that you have a guest Wi-Fi in place, number one. Number two, that you have staff understand that if they're connecting a personal device when they walk through the door, they're connecting to the guest Wi-Fi. And I know a number of counties that they allow that rather than connecting to the regular employee staff Wi-Fi to play music or whatever they want to do. And then I mentioned the password piece there, but also changing that password on the guest Wi-Fi fairly frequently. It may be inconvenient for folks coming to use the Wi-Fi, especially like in the courts, but your resolution to being more secure is going to go up. VPNs, I'm not going to spend much time here because I know so many of you already understand and have in place virtual private networks, especially if someone's working from home and they're connecting to a payroll system or a jail management system that's located still within your network. Identity management, you really need to know who is on your network at any given point in time. And there are a number of tools out there that might cost a little bit, but you can run any point in time, and it can send you notices as well. Incident response. I think we're going to spend some more time on this in a future week, if I remember correctly. This is another takeaway from today. Even if it's 2 pages, just sit down and talk with your IT team, as well as department heads and elected officials of, here's what our response plan is, and who gets notified in general when we run into an incident. Not everything needs elevated to your elected officials, but at some point you have to know when. And then network monitoring, that one has a $sign usually. And think Splunk, think Manage Engine, which is a little bit less expensive. Great tool to have in place, because it, again, will send you notices if behavior is happening on your network that is unusual or high volume. And then, of course, finally, physically protecting your equipment. I have done IT assessments in counties, and I know there are situations where you have like your data center or a server room, you have your equipment in there, but I'll go into a department, children youth agency, and the server's sitting underneath the administrator's desk. I've also, and one of the situations I'm sharing is fairly recent, where there's a data center and you have a key to it, and the janitor has a key to it. And by the way, did I mention that the key is hanging on the key holder at the top of the steps going down to the basement where the server room is? So in reality, anybody could get that key and go downstairs and get into the room. I hope that's not the situation still for a lot of folks, but ask the question, especially if you're a new IT director in your position or a new elected official. Ask the question, how many people have the ability to get into our server room if we still have, servers on premise? And how many have keys, or what, is it just one key? Is it a multiple device or multiple options that you need to get into the room? For example, not only do you need the key fob, but you need a PIN, an ID, or it's biometric. Those are the ways that you can improve your cybersecurity over the course of a year. So I really do like this. I've seen a number of different checklists like this, and they're very helpful. So we will definitely make sure you all have this, but let's go a little deeper and let's look at what CISA, which is part of Department of Homeland Security, has created. They just put this out in September, and it is their guide from a, this first slide is from a leadership perspective of what does leadership need to be aware of when it comes to cyber essentials. And then we'll talk in a few minutes about the second slide, which is more of a checklist similar to what we just talked about. So first and foremost, in talking to leadership, is saying to those outside of IT that maybe that's not their main role, but saying, how do you protect yourself at home? You know, how do you keep your bank accounts safe? And do you do banking online? Just being aware of the basics that are important there is extremely critical. And having that conversation from a non-technical perspective of, you know, how do you stay secure is really important in starting the conversation with elected officials. And this security awareness and vigilance with your staff. I love this one, and we've been talking about it for many years. More and more counties are putting into place some sort of phishing subscription that will send emails that really look fake or look real, that are really fake, but they're a test to see how well your employee is doing. And then there now are the opportunities to watch short 15-minute videos, sometimes 5-minute videos, to help raise the awareness of your staff. I believe you all have heard this many times, and I'm going to say it again today. Our weakest link are humans, people, and it is our employees. Whether they're in IT or not, doesn't matter. They still are our weakest link. So having some sort of a security awareness program in place, explaining that to elected officials, is getting easier. Awareness of the systems. This is where it's hard, you know, you don't want to get too technical with those that are in leadership, but also letting folks know that this isn't a once and done cost. This is ongoing. We need cybersecurity around all of our systems, whether we host them or they're in the cloud or hosted by others. And then surroundings, I think that's pretty self-explanatory, but I love the video. There's a kind of a takeoff video that's fairly old, but has to do with Columbo. If any of you are my age, you'll remember who Columbo was. And he's walking up to the building, and he's behind someone with a badge to get into the building, and he just follows them right behind them like he's with them. Nobody asks a question. He's in the building now, and he's unauthorized. How far can he get? Remember the keys at the top of the steps that all you had to do was take them off the key hanger and go down and open up the server room? Well, if he knew that, he or she would be in a heartbeat. And ask the question, all right, I'm in my server room, but are my servers in locked, what are called racks, locked cabinets? I have been in many server rooms where the server itself, the equipment, is in the cabinet and the door is wide open. So now you're even more vulnerably exposed. Talking data, I can talk for a very long time. I won't today about how important data is. And the best way to explain this to elected officials and to county administrators is, so look at the news and look at what happened to the hospitals a couple weeks ago. And it's real prolific right now, ransomware on hospitals. And look at the bad publicity they're getting. What would happen if local newspaper got a hold of something like that with our county, and now it's all over the newspaper, and it's a month before your commissioner election? Putting it in terms like that, where it's very much an image perspective, gets the point across in a very positive way, but also then talking as well about violations from the HIPAA perspective. And there are fines being administered both from HIPAA and from some other organizations at the national level. And then finally, with leadership, helping them understand to say, I know I can't control everything. So how do I react under stress? The more you can practice and do tabletops and some scenarios, the better you're going to respond in an emerging situation. Some folks are very calm by nature and nothing phases them, but many folks have a hard time staying calm. The more you practice, the better you are to stay calm and make better decisions. So this is the leadership guide that CISA put out. Very good, very easy to understand. You could take each of these boxes and create your own PowerPoint from it, for sure. The second part of it is what's called booting up, and it's the IT guide. So you'll see some similarities here. Same categories of protecting yourself, protecting your staff, your systems, your surroundings, your data, and then finally protecting your actions under stress. But now it's in a checklist format. And each of these areas has a specific question to ask. And, it's, have you led investment in basic cybersecurity? Have you been able to put the phishing subscription in place because you got approval to do that? Have you determined how much of the operations are dependent on IT? I just had this conversation internally before I got on this call today about the importance of asking each of our department heads, what's most critical in your job when you're delivering services to, in our case, our members, in your case, to citizens, and what happens if I can't get to that information? So just having those conversations doesn't take money. It's very easy to do and makes everyone more aware, and also helps you prioritize as an IT director or an IT person. I'm not going to go through all of these. Let me just do a couple in each area. I already mentioned on the earlier checklist how important it is to keep your staff educated on cyber awareness and cybersecurity. And that can come from a number of options. You'll hear a little bit later about what the Cybersecurity Collaborative has to offer. We talked about the tech exchange and resources there. Those are all really important options that you can put into place to help educate your internal IT staff. And I will send this information to Anne-Marie when we're done. But there's also what's called Fed VTE. Fed as in federal, V as in Victor, T as in technology, E as in education. And if you Google that, that's another service under Department of Homeland Security that has free educational videos, and then they're technical, that you as government employees can have access to. So Anne-Marie, don't let me forget, I'll send that to you as well. I've looked at some of them, they're excellent. Under the systems piece, what I want to mention here is, of course, automatic updates is always important. Somewhere in one of these, I don't remember exactly where it is, but multi-factor authentication, that's going to be one of my mantras for 2021 in helping counties get there. And thank you, it's at the top of the screen there. But another one that is very important is what's called DMARC. So that domain-based piece to keep your email secure. And I've recently been in contact with the one alliance that provides that training under MSISAC, and we're looking at providing a free training and a special training just for county government. DMARC was listed a couple weeks ago in right before the election itself, and how important it is and how it can positively affect your cyber posture. So another piece that please watch for that information as we work through that. Your surroundings, I think I've covered that pretty well. This does repeat some of what I've talked about there. And then the data piece, I know this is hard. A data asset inventory. It's something I've seen counties struggle with over and over again, even just with starting with where is our structured data? In other words, where is that application housed for the jail management system? You may know that one. Does it have information in it that needs protected? That's an easy yes. Where's that children and youth spreadsheet that somebody downloaded from the case management system? Oh, it's on box.com. Are you going to know about that? So we can't know everything, but we can start a data asset inventory and add to it as we go, and start with what you know, and then just, you know, bit by bit with each department, presenting why you're looking at a data asset inventory, that you're there to help them and help protect their data. One other piece here under actions under stress. As I said earlier, practice will help you significantly, and also knowing who to call when there's an incident. So I was talking ahead of time with Michael here about the insurance programs that you have in Wisconsin and the cyber insurance that many of you have access to. Know where that list is and know what the protocols are and the people to contact. That's an easy document that you can have loaded on your phone or on your computer. And knowing that and not having to go look for it really helps keep the stress level down. So this is number 2. And we're going to end with this last one. And this is a takeaway. I am going to challenge you all to take the NCSR. So this one is definitely technical, and we'll need your IT folks to sit down and go through it. But then there's a leadership piece at the end in sharing information about it. So let me just talk a little bit about this. The Nationwide Cybersecurity Review is no cost. It is anonymous in terms of they don't share what organization scored what. And it is aligned with NIST, which is very important. That's the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the cybersecurity framework. And I have to tell you, having done this many times, so I think I'm going to try to remember, we've done it 2 years here at NACO, and in my former position, we did at least 3 or 4 of them. So I'm familiar with it from a long-term perspective. The first time through can be a little daunting. But let me just share with you what it looks like a little bit and help you understand the importance of completing it. I want to emphasize it is a self-assessment, so it's not going to cost you anything except being honest. So I say that, and thank you for advancing the slide there, Tim. I say that because we as IT professionals want to think, and we should, we're doing everything we can to make our environment secure. Being honest, just like with your health, is very important. Now, with your health, if you go in and get a physical and you get your cholesterol level done, it's going to give you away if you're cheating. This isn't going to give you away if you're not honest. Where it's going to hurt you is actually getting funding that for something that you may need to improve. And it could hurt you because now you're documenting something that you might not have in place. Now, I'm not saying that anyone on this webinar today would do that. But as you work through it, there's different levels of answering questions. So just keep that in mind. You'll get metrics on a number of areas, and I'll talk about those in a minute. You're able to prioritize what your next steps need to be in cybersecurity. And folks, this is not an 800K race. This is a marathon. And keep that in mind when you're prioritizing for 2021. What's the most important thing that needs to happen, and balancing that with risk of not doing it, but also cost. And then looking at on the website where the portal is, there's resources and services that they point out for you. And it also does help tie you back from a HIPAA perspective to the HIPAA security rule. And then, as I said, this ties directly to NIST. Everyone in IT should know 800-53. Doesn't mean you have to know it in detail, but you have to know it exists, and you have to know how to Google it and look and see what the specifics are in a particular area. And then again, sys controls are very important. And that's the top 20. I will tell you from a sys control perspective, and control is just another big word for what should you have in place. If you meet the first 5, you're hitting 80% of cybersecurity. So this assessment, like I said, is very important on a local level. It is also required now. Last year was the first year. If you receive or are able to apply for any of the Homeland Security grants, the HSGP, sometimes that'll come through your risk manager at the county level. You have to complete this assessment. So keep that in mind as well. And then from a national perspective, DHS is able to have a little bit better picture at an aggregate level of the cybersecurity posture for state and local government and tribal. So what does it look like? I've talked a lot, so let's look at the next slide. When you log in, and by the way, you'll see that there was a link on the prior slide. You can sign up today. You could even sign up right now while we're talking. It might be the one before that. Sorry. There it is. I knew it was on there somewhere. So just take a look at that. Brandon, if you have a minute, can cut and paste that into the chat for us. That would be great. And so let's just move on here. And the dashboard, when you log in, under where the red arrow is, will say the years that you've taken it. And of course, this year it will be listed right as 2020. And then, or excuse me, as 2021. I cut and pasted this from something else. And then you have the opportunity, once you click on it, to go into the detail and start completing the questions. I'm not going to show you all the questions, but what I do want to show you on the next slide is the results as well as the areas. So the questions are arranged. You have to answer some demographic questions, and you have to answer a series of questions that talk about identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. A couple other tabs have to do with additional information they provide, but those are the main areas. So identify, of course, is have you identified your assets? And a lot of questions related to that. Protection is exactly what it says. Are you doing multi-factor authentication? And it's not just yes or no. Policies fall under protection as well. And it might be not in place. I don't have the 5 options in front of me, but informally documented is one, formally documented is another, and it goes up the line there. So you do get credit for if it's informally documented, because I know so many of us have those situations where we know the devil's in the details and we know we need to be putting this in writing, but at least it's in my head. And at least we know that we're practicing it. Well, you'll get credit for that. But as you can see, the maturity line here is a 5. And in this example, then, no one's meeting the 5. Now, number 4 for the area of recovery, they're not doing too bad. And that's good, getting close to there. But that has to do with, we have cyber insurance, and we know if we have an incident that we've got the right folks that are going to do the forensics for us, and they got credit for that. So I love this chart for sure. And then what happens afterwards is that you can take this graph, and with a few words, you can show it to your elected officials, and you can say, here's where we're lacking. If you look under identify, you see it's pretty low. And so you can be more specific on what the need is. And you can also take this NCSR, not just use it for that grant, but also use it when your auditors say, what have you done in terms of an assessment? If you remember earlier, I talked about the security assessments. They're extremely costly. You do need to do them at some point, but this gets you started. And it's very important that you do something, because as audits become more specific, there will be findings, if you aren't already having them, that say that your county is not secure enough and need to make changes. So in summary, let me just close with a couple notes for you today about the NCSR specifically. On the next slide, Tim. So how to use the tool. Take it before December 31st, because it's not open year round. It is only open usually from October to December. And I'm going to be honest, it's going to take you about 3 hours to go through it the first time. Next year it will be less. It'll be a little easier. You hit submit on the portal, and then you'll get a set of reports and graphs that you can take, to use to prioritize for your cyber efforts coming up in 2021, but also to take to your elected officials with, this is why I need XYZ tool, or this is why I need XYZ service. And that is a whole lot easier to defend, because now you're using data analytics to put that in place. So let me stop there. I'm going to turn it back over to Tim, and I will take a look at some of the chat and see if there's anything I can answer there. But Tim, it's back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Rita. And, one of the things that you talk about quite a bit is, one, there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of access to information out there. And one of the things that we have found extremely valuable is collaborating with one another to make it happen, to conduct these assessments and to work with one another to understand where we're currently at, where we need to be at that minimum maturity level, and then what are the best practices in which to get there. And again, I bring up best practices here, knowing that what is best practice for one organization is not necessarily best practice for another, and from one county to the next. One thing I'd love to have you talk about, Rita, before we go to some of the next slides, there can be a lot of complexity around this. And for the technologists and the cyber specific individuals on this webinar, a lot of what's been discussed is probably very common language for you and very understandable. Rita, there's also a number of individuals who may not have that same level of cyber savviness and cyber language. But one of the things that I think you and NACO and others do such a great job with is you have an IT advisory committee that if individuals on this call or individuals within the counties who are on this call have questions, they obviously can reach out to their IT staff within their counties. They can also reach out to you, Rita, relative to the NACO Tech Exchange that you run, the Cybersecurity Collaborative. All of us are really focused on the same end goal, and that is increasing our ability to defend and protect the critical assets that are necessary to conduct the business of counties. And so, Rita, do you want to share a little bit about the work that you're doing across the IT Advisory Council, the IT Standing Steering Committee that you have within NACO, and all of the counties, not just in Wisconsin, but across the United States, and really with the foundational element of collaborating? Because you talked about policies. You've got a host of policies that individuals don't have to write their own policies around, authentication rights or the policies of work from home. If folks are working on that, they can come to you because you've already got a lot of that written. You can provide that to them through the collaboration of the NACO network and the Cybersecurity Collaborative and others that you work with every day.
Thank you, Tim. And let me just take a few minutes to talk to that. The IT Advisory Council for NACO was formed just a little over a year and a half ago. And it consists of a wide range of CIOs, IT directors, and a few state association CIOs. And we've been able to develop a nice set of what I would call pillars that have helped with the technology blueprint. And our focus really is around member engagement. So the county IT leadership, first and foremost, but also elected officials, because we all know and understand that while the technical world is hard to grasp, elected officials need to understand some of the basics and why we're having such a big budget request with a large price tag at times. And so this IT Advisory Council has really helped to represent all of the counties across the United States when we start having legislative conversations, which we do. There's some different legislation that is either proposed or coming fairly soon, and it needs that county input, number one. Number two, it helps set priorities. So for 2021, I've already put out a survey as a response to the IT Standing Committee of what are our priorities that NACO is going to focus on. We can't do everything. And and we need partners in some cases. So I'm happy to report so far, cybersecurity is leading the charge again, even with COVID. It kind of took a side seat for a little bit because we knew it was important to get staff up and working remotely. But now it's still number one. And broadband's on that list, and data governance. We've expanded it from 5 priorities to, I want to say 7. And that's not a bad thing, but now we can focus on what educational opportunities we should be providing. And the tech exchange, the repository was number 2. So that is an area that if you're part of the tech exchange membership, you can log in, you get access to quite a few different policy templates. We're always looking for more, for sure. But then there are other resources that we have on the portal pages that direct you to, hey, here's another resource or another repository we recommend. So it shortens your time for research. And we're working very closely, the Tech Exchange, with the Cybersecurity Collaborative for some exciting opportunities in 2021 that are going to be there to help county and local IT folks as well. Let me just end with, if you're an elected official or a county administrator, we are looking for what I would call elected official IT ambassadors. And we have 2 right now. And what that means is that you're an elected official, you really are involved with technology or have been in a prior life. For example, we have a commissioner who had his own computer company for years and consulting, and he's a commissioner now. He is an advocate for technology. When you have elected officials like that we can plug into and have them on a panel, that says a world of support for the IT functions, but also is speaking the language of an elected official. So I'll stop there, but thank you, Tim, for that question.
Yeah, and thank you, Rita. One of the other things that Rita and the County Tech Exchange is making available to all counties across the United States in terms of that training and that ongoing education and the practice that Rita had mentioned, they are in partnership with the Professional Development Academy as well, providing cybersecurity training, leadership training. But also what they're doing more recently is Rita and that academy have built online tabletop practice exercises, and we have free for county members an Internet of Things threat that is being facilitated by Rita as well as the Academy around that that Internet of Things threat simulation. And so through the practice of that, and it's coming up on December 7th, and again, it's free. It's typically $795. Anyone who wants to go through it, who is in county government, can go through at free, thanks to NACO and the Tech Exchange. And so if you're interested in that, by all means, let us know. Feel free to just drop your name in the chat box, and Rita and I will pick that up and get back in touch with you about how to engage in that. It will be facilitated online, so there's no travel involved. And it is all in this idea, in the spirit of collaboration, collaborating with one another to make sure that we have the highest level of readiness when it comes to the most threat that we currently have that we're facing today. And that is, as Rita just mentioned, the priority number 1 for most all organizations is cybersecurity. How do we protect our employees, our critical assets, our customers that we work with every day in the way in which we deliver services to them? So if you're interested in participating or know someone from your county that will be interested, by all means, let us know. Speaking of collaboration, and in a wrap up of what it is we've been focusing on, the real question is, yes, we know that we need to get better. We have to be able to assess where we're at, assess where we need to be, and then identify how do we get there. Well, one of the ways in which Rita's been explaining that is there are a lot of tools available to us to think about how do we conduct that inventory assessment? How do we conduct that overall assessment regarding where we're at and our readiness to defend against cybersecurity threats, and where it is that we're going to be in the future and where we need to be in order to be at that minimum maturity level when it comes to cybersecurity readiness and preparedness for the threats that are all around us. This is another 10-point assessment that is fairly straightforward, easy to see, easy to understand. And if you don't understand, that full system inventory. Rita's mentioned this earlier. We're mentioning it again now. If you're not an IT specialist, if you're not in the profession of cybersecurity and you don't know what the full system inventory is, bring this list of 10 topics and start the conversation, create the dialogue. Rita mentioned, one of the things that we really want to be able to focus on is to create a conversation around where we're at from a cybersecurity readiness and how we can best defend. Part of that best defense is people collaborating with one another and engaging in the dialogue. Think about where we're at, from our workforce, from detection systems to separating and segmenting our network of access, as well as the assets within our network. If we want to think about it truly in the form of questions, and Rita shared some of these already with us today in different forms. This is just a different way to look at some of the questions. You don't need to memorize these questions. You can certainly take a screenshot of this. It's going to be available after this webinar as well. Use these questions. Use these questions as part of an ongoing conversation with your IT staff, whether they're in the county itself, or if it's a shared service. Some of you outsource this and share this service with other neighboring counties. Bring this forward as a point of conversation and dialogue with your members. And if you want to get involved, feel free to reach out to Rita. Feel free to reach out to members within Wisconsin about how to get involved with NACO, how to get involved with the NACO, Tech Exchange, how to get involved with the Cybersecurity Collaborative. We're happy to, welcome you to the network of professionals working toward increasing a level of readiness, increasing a level of awareness when it comes to cybersecurity, because it is, as we worked through in webinar 1, and we'll continue the red thread all the way through this webinar series, security is one of the number one priorities when it comes to continuation and continuity of business, whether it's county business or private industry. It is priority number one for all of us. And Michael, on behalf of Rita and myself, we want to say thank you again for the work that you're doing across Wisconsin for all the counties. This is one of the most important topics that we can take on among many. I know that there are a number of priority one topics, but cybersecurity certainly is one. And Michael, thank you for recognizing this. And again, thank you for the invitation for Rita and I to share our resources in our network. At any time, feel free to reach out to us for additional support when it comes to cybersecurity.
Thank you, Tim. And again, thank you, Rita. Thank you, Tim, for the presentation today. For all of those still on the webinar, the part 3 will be next Tuesday, November 17th, again at 10 a.m. And feel free to reach out to myself, Tim, Rita, Brandon, who's also been communicating with people via chat if you have any questions. But we hope that you will join us again next week. This video can be found on the wicounties.org. If you go there and click the WCA video library, all of these webinars will be recorded and will be there. And also it will be sent out on social media. So again, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Rita. Look forward to seeing everyone next week.